Hi, my name is John Daniel. I teach the trumpet at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, in the conservatory, Lawrence Conservatory of Music. And I've written a trumpet method. I call it Special Studies for Trumpet. And you can find it at johndanieltrumpet.com. And I'm teaching a series of short lessons from the material in my book. And the lesson I'm going to teach now has to do with articulation or tonguing. The first thing I like to do, if you own the book, I'm starting on page 82 and 83. The first thing I like to do is work on getting the trumpet to go. The very first note that we play, there's tendency to over-articulate, to be extra sure that it's going to come out. So you often hear this effect. Maybe the first three notes are all supposed to be legato, and you'll hear. So they're not all legato. The first note is tongued harder. And to get rid of that requires a really sure knowledge of what you're doing with your air and your embouchure, and to not overdo anything with the tongue. So I like to practice fixing that by working on a breath attack and then adding the tongue after the note has already started. So the idea then is to reduce the amount of space between the two notes. So I'm going to breath attack and then tongue a little sooner. Until finally you end up breath attacking and tonguing simultaneously, which is a little different than what we end up learning how to do on the trumpet, where we tend to catch our breath in maybe our throat or our tongue or both and release it suddenly, sort of like pulling an arrow and releasing it. There's a lot of tension that is released all of a sudden, and it's hard to control the actual front end of the note, and it just builds up a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of trumpet players that have what I would refer to as some degree of initial attack syndrome, where they're just not very confident about starting the trumpet under pressure. And this is a way of getting around that. So you could do this on a bunch of notes. Until you can confidently feel like you're breath attacking and just gently tonguing at the same time. And once you get that feeling going, you can do that. And it builds a lot of confidence. So you can start notes out of the blue and feel relatively secure that they're going to come out. And so I would practice things of this nature. I call those hoodoos. So you breath attack the note and then tongue immediately after that. So you get the feeling of the air and embouchure producing a note, and then we tongue. And eventually you put the two acts together. It becomes, but there's still a feeling of poo between your air and your lips. Some other ideas I work on with tonguing is getting the tongue to, I call it bounce on the roof of the mouth. It's not literally what's going on, but the idea is to get it to function a little bit like a rolled R or like flutter tonguing. So when you're flutter tonguing, you're putting the tongue in the way of the airstream on the roof of your mouth in a certain position, so that the tongue wants to be in the roof of your mouth, but the air wants it not to be, and you put those two forces in balance, and you get this fluttering effect, sort of like a flag fluttering in the breeze on a strong windy day. And what we want is the same basic feeling of balance when we're single tonguing. So it's a different position with the tongue, but it's the same concept. So for flutter tonguing, for fast single tonguing, you find a different position, so it sounds like single tonguing. But you want to control that position so that you can single tongue on the various pitches at various speeds. So I would start by just tonguing two notes together, do-do, and then gradually getting them closer together. And then I would work on three notes. Four notes. Until we get them as close together as we can. Keep adding notes until we get this effect of kind of a sustained stutter, you might say. And if you can control the speed of that, then you always have this feeling of the tongue not disrupting the air in the embouchure, but being part of a system, being integrated and in balance with the air in the embouchure. There's a tendency when we think about language with tu or do or ku or gu or whatever it is, to focus on what it feels like to say those syllables. And the problem with that as a trumpet player is when we speak, we don't make an embouchure. When we speak, we don't blow a lot of air. And those are things we have to do when we play the trumpet. So we have to be very careful when we're articulating on the trumpet that we're not letting go of some tone production issues. So if you practice, for example, lip slurring and tonguing in tandem, the idea is to make sure that whatever you're doing to make a good sounding lip slur, you're not giving that away when you start tonguing. Specifically, we might have the tongue in one position as we're slurring, and then the tip of the tongue does something that causes the back of the tongue to go into a different position when we start tonguing, and then we start playing the trumpet poorly and thinking maybe we don't know how to tongue. And it's a conceptual thing. The problem is as we tongue, we're not playing the trumpet as well. And so we have to work through that and stop doing that. So you ask yourself, how am I using my face? How am I using my tongue? How am I using my air when I do that? And make sure that as you start tonguing those notes, you're adding the tongue to those events, not taking anything away from those events. That sort of thing. You just have to make sure that as you tongue, you're not doing something different with the back of your tongue or with your throat or with your air or your jaw. There's all kinds of things that can relax when we start thinking about tonguing and the syllables of tonguing. My name is John Daniel. I'm teaching from Special Studies for Trumpet, and you can find it at johndanieltrumpet.com.